Amen. All right, so I've had some folks on an endeavor today as we put out yesterday. I sent out some things, and I'll say this in the beginning of this, that on Facebook, generally speaking, on Tuesdays, I try before lunchtime to put out a Facebook post that is a teaser that lets you know what we'll be talking about tonight. And so you can usually go on there. I do not put out my notes until Wednesday morning, in the chance that I may want to change something. But I put this out yesterday as a question in a post that gave you some things to gnaw on if you so chose to do so yesterday. But looking at this question, how were Gentiles saved in the Old Testament? If you've read through everything and you got what you feel like is a perfect answer, you can hold that till just a few minutes. But I'm specifically asking here about Gentiles. And Gentiles are what? They're non-Jews, okay? And that's the broad spectrum that I'm talking about. A person who is not Jewish, all right? So if you're looking at that, I got a couple of questions. These are things that I want you to think about, not really have an answer to right this moment. But when you're thinking about this, in the time in Philistia, when in the Philistines, David and them are fighting, or Saul is fighting them, and David goes and kills Goliath. During that time, let's say there's a little Philistine kid that's like, I really don't like these Philistine gods. They're not really doing anything for me. There's got to be something more. Somewhere in their heart, they're thinking there's something more, something better, something more real out there. How does that Philistine kid or grown person, how do they get saved during that time? Think about that. Ponder upon it. What about someone that's born in Canaan during the time of Joshua when they're going in to take over the promised land? What were they supposed to do? What was Joshua and them supposed to do for the people, the inhabitants of Canaan land? Annihilate everything living, basically, right? Who was included in that? Women, children, babies, livestock, the animals. They squashed the roaches and the spiders, it was supposed to be. Now, that did not occur in its fullest sense, but God said annihilate those people. What about some of those people that they were innocent? Wait. They were quote unquote. Where nobody's innocent, right? If we have original sin, but they were innocent kids. That pulls on our heartstrings. So let's say that. What about a kid? Maybe being saved during that time. What mechanism did these people go through, if any at all? You think about a mechanism. The reason I put that in quotations, what is a mechanism of us getting saved? Today, if you want to be saved, then generally, right, you go up to an altar in a church and you have somebody meet you there, maybe a preacher, and that preacher may ask you some questions. And then they'll say, hey, well, either you can go take a class. Some places make you take a class and a catechism type thing in different churches for you to learn about all the doctrine of that church and all before you necessarily get saved. But in a lot of evangelical churches, they'll say, okay, well, repeat after me. And you repeat this prayer and you get up and you're saved. Right, and then you follow by that. They try to drown you for about half of 2 seconds, in a baptismal pool later. You get baptized, and they ship you on off and say, you got your golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And so that is and I talk about it in a joking way because that hadn't worked. Okay, you say, well, he's defiling our mechanism of salvation. I'll submit to you that ain't a good mechanism of salvation. Okay? Because it has produced the society in which we're living in today. Are you going to answer a question or you got a comment? Oh, no, hold on. Bear with me. As we're looking at this, I read the Old Testament and I look at it and I'm going, man, the New Testament is so evangelistic. It's go out and go out and go out and reach the lost people. We just went through this study for the Apostle Paul. His sole mission, right, is he's poured out his entire life to reach the lost, to reach the Gentiles, right? Where was the Paul of the Old Testament, though? What about all of those people? All of those people across thousands and thousands of years of Old Testament history. You mean to tell me that nobody was going after them? It was just, kill them? Is that what it seems to be? In there. I think many people would probably point to the law of Moses and say, well, people had to keep the Mosaic law. Well, I'm not sure that would necessarily be the case, because who was the law written for? Hmm? Yeah, what I'm saying, what was the law written for the Egyptians? Jews. Yeah. So if you're in Philistia, you don't have to follow the law. The law wasn't written for the people in Philistia, specifically as far as the primary person. They could keep it if they'd like to. So I'll stop for just a moment to get what Jessica, you think you got the answer to the question? So what I want you to explore, though, is by what mechanism. And I use that term in quotations. Like I said, this is what we do. What practically did a person do in the Old Testament that somebody who could observe what they did would say, you're good, you're saved? Huh? Obey the Noahide laws? No, I'm saying we watch somebody go through something outwardly of coming up to an altar, and then they get baptized, and then we'll say that person's saved. What could a person do back then? And I say if any when I ask this question, by what mechanism was there a class? Did they go through anything formal? What did a Old Testament Gentile do? If you're a Jew, let me just postulate this. If you're a Jew, right, you would keep the law. You would do a mikvah, baptism. You would attend the festivals. You'd sacrifice. You'd do all that kind of stuff. And somebody could look at you and say, you are following God's law. We think you're a part of you're righteous. What could a Gentile do during Old Testament times that would let somebody think that they were saved? What were they obeying?
I think on top of that, you have to add a lot of faith in there. Faith and obedience.
Faith, for what context of faith would they know, though? What was their basis of? These are church words.
Faith in God and faith in the
But listen, faith is the evidence. It's the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. They had no context. If they're born in a foreign country, right, around foreign gods, they don't have any law book, no Jew, no synagogue, no nothing. Faith is believing in something you can't see. Well, they don't even have any context in what I'm. Jim touched on something that makes my answer.
have a little bit of context, because if they believe in God, then God tugs at their heart, just like the little boy said, the Philistines, it's got to be more than this.
Huh. Okay.
There's no mechanism.
Hold on a minute. What were you going to say? We'll see. We'll see. I'm not going to answer the question. It's a good question. Well,
Back to what Jim was saying. If they had not heard, how did they know a God?
we're not going to belabor the point yet, but Jim made a fantastic point in his comment, and we're going to get back to it in a minute. If you missed it, you'll hear it again. Yes. The Philistines heard a prophet though? The Jews? I'm talking about Gentiles. See? That's why I tell you, I mean to hit the... There were some Gentiles that heard the prophets now, But, I mean, they heard it in a cursory way sometimes, or they were speaking directly to some of the people. Let's take a look at Galatians chapter 3, verses 10 through 14 real quick. And look at what the Apostle Paul is writing. Remember now, he wrote the book of Galatians when? This is a test. What missionary journey? No. First missionary journey. If I remember right, it's the first missionary journey, I think. Okay, if I got that wrong, shame on me. But I'm pretty sure that's the only book he wrote early in the first missionary journey. All right, so he's writing to the church at Galatia, and he says, "For all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse." Okay, so think about this. I won't go through this slowly. Think about it. All the people that are relying on the works of the law, they are under a curse. And it says, as it is written. So he's going to give some scripture here, okay? I've listed in your notes, verse 10, 11, 12, and 13, the Old Testament verses that he is quoting here, okay? So here is in Deuteronomy 27, 26. Cursed is everyone who does not continue to do everything written in the book of the law. So you're cursed if you do not do everything written. It says clearly no one who relies on the law is justified before God. Hold on a minute. If you don't do everything in the law, you're cursed. And then everyone who does rely on the law, it says none of them are justified before God. Good heavens. What is he saying? Verse 12. The end of verse 11. Because the righteous will what? Live by faith. Seems like the law is not quite important here in what Paul is, as important as some would have thought. In verse 12, he says the law is not based on faith. He says on the contrary. It says the person who does these things will live by them. You can keep going. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. So think about that. It said anybody who's relying on the law is cursed. The law brings a curse, and Christ had to come up under that quote-unquote curse, all right, when he hung there on the cross. And he died because to meet the righteous standards of the law. It says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, curses everyone who is hung on a pole. He redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abraham might come to the Gentiles through Christ Jesus, so that by faith we might receive the promise of the Holy Spirit, the promise of the Spirit. So, what brings you salvation, according to what Paul is saying? The law? Okay, faith, right? So Paul's saying, hey, the law is not gonna get you there, and he does a wonderful job teaching the church here about the relationship between the Jews and the law. They were supposed to keep the law, but the law, as Jim mentioned earlier, the law was there to show us you've got a problem, because when you stack yourself up against God's righteous standard and all of the do's and all of the don'ts, you realize, wow, that's a standard that's very difficult for me to be able to meet. It's a mirror to us to show us what's going on. So the law brings a curse to you because it shows you. I said this the other day in Sunday school, and I think in my sermon, that when you can cause your kids to sin, or to disobey you, I mean to say, when you set a standard. You say, go clean your room. Well, now you have given them something to disobey. Without you having said that, there was nothing to disobey you. When you start laying down the law, you give them something to disobey, and they probably are going to disobey. So you as a parent can say, I want my kids to be perfect, so I'll never give them any rules. But duh, that's not even how the way the world works, okay? So the law brings curses in the sense that it's because of that we had something to fall short of. Now, in Galatians 3:24, Paul says, so the law was our guardian until Christ came, that we may be justified by faith. And I'd encourage you to read the entirety of Galatians chapter 3, right? It gives a wonderful chapter to give you this idea between the law and salvation. But he says here, and I think in other translations, probably in the New American Standard, I believe it is in the King James, that it says the law was our tutor, right? Schoolmaster. King James says schoolmaster, yeah. And I think there's the New American Standard say tutor? Yeah. And so the NIV renders that word guardian, okay, until Christ came. So it was kind of our intermediary situation that came, and that Christ, until Christ came, that we might be justified then by faith. If you look at what Paul writes in Romans 3, verses 19 through 20, it says, now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. So it tells you right there, plain and simple, the law is not what you're going to be saved by. Do you see that? Verse 20. It says, therefore no one will be declared righteous in God's sight. If you're going to, righteous means you're in right alignment with God. If you're full of sin, then you're not righteous and you're not saved, okay? And so you're not righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. The law is not going to get you there, all right? Did the law get the Jews there? Hebrews 10, 1 through 4. The law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. Otherwise, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshipers would have been cleansed once for all and would no longer have felt guilty of their sins. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins. In verse 4, it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. So living by the law, sacrificing according to the law, never was taken away unrighteousness. Okay? It was a placeholder. It was a reminder. That's exactly what the author of Hebrews is saying. It's a shadow of the good things that are coming. Paul is writing at it to be this reminder. When they would go up annually, and the Day of Atonement, and the high priest would sacrifice, and the blood would be poured out, and all of those things that would be done. And when you would go, up and sacrifice the animals for your family, that was a constant reminder for you that something had to die to satisfy God's righteousness here. But never was that blood of the bull or the goat or the doves or the grain offerings or any of those things, never was it really washing away sin. If that could have, Jesus wouldn't have needed to go to the cross, because the blood of bulls and goats would have been sufficient, right? It was this reminder. It was one level of revelation. And I mean God's mindset being revealed to us. So, now, with that being said, if the law and the sacrificial system were not good enough to save even the Jews, what hope was there for the Gentiles? If they didn't have a reminder, they didn't have the law, they didn't have this revelation from God through the prophets and through Moses and all of that stuff. If you recall in Luke 16, when the rich man and the beggar Lazarus, And he wouldn't even let the guy get the crumbs that fell from his table. And the rich man said, Father Abraham, I'm in torment in these flames. Will you send Lazarus to go tell my brothers? Send Lazarus, number one, to dip his finger and come quench his lips, because he was in agony. And he said, well, will he go tell my brothers? Warn them so they don't come to this place. Abraham looks at the rich man and he says, your brothers have Moses and the prophets. They were Jews. They did. Gentiles, and what does that mean? They have the Bible. They have the Old Testament. They have Moses' writing in the Torah, and they have the prophets, which would have been the entirety of the major and minor prophets as well. The Gentiles in Philistia or any of these other places didn't have that. You would think it'd be pretty difficult to get saved. If you answer the question and say that they're justified by faith, which is what we've been talking about, the question that I have for you is how? Brenda mentioned that earlier. Well, how? It's easy to say that you're justified by faith. But how would somebody explain if you were an evangelist in Philistia at the time? How would you explain to that Gentile to be saved? What is your gospel presentation pitch to them at that time? They don't have the law. They don't have prophets. They don't have any context. Would you tell them they have to become a Jew and follow the law and be circumcised and keep the festivals? And what would you do? Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. Let's explore it.
I think God was evangelizing for himself.
You think God was evangelizing for himself?
Did Nebuchadnezzar praise God?
Yeah, I don't know if Nebuchadnezzar got saved, though.
Was a Gentile?
Well, did Nebuchadnezzar praise God? Nebuchadnezzar, he gave an order to say, you better not talk against this God. So maybe you can look at it that way.
His people to worship the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Didn't he?
Yeah, well.
So maybe God was doing his own evangelism.
He maybe was. Yeah, he may.
Certainly he had to.
You certainly had to be. I'm not saying I disagree with you. Because I said for the Jews, they had the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and the prophets. Jim mentions that, yes, Abraham was the first Jew. There wasn't a Jew before him. He was the one that created, this thing called Jews. And then his son, grandson, and then you have all the tribes of Israel. So they had all of this, and then, of course, Moses and them that in their writings. But again, I ask at this point in your notes, who is evangelizing those people in the Old Testament times? So think about it. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 16 and 17, I mentioned earlier, that's when God ordered the annihilation of the Canaanite people and all the things living. And it really doesn't seem like that there was that much heart of evangelizing in our biblical account, because wouldn't you have imagined that God would have said, hey, Joshua, send some people over there to them Canaanite lands. Let's win them, for the cause of Christ or something like that. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 2 through 3, you have a similar type of event of annihilation of an entire people group. The Old Testament is speaking like this of what we have. It's not what you see. You certainly never see in the New Testament, do you, that God told Paul and Barnabas and Silas and Timothy and Titus and all of them, go over there to Corinth and annihilate them. What was he saying? Go over there and you may get annihilated, but what you're going over there to do is try to change hearts. Why such a mean tone, I guess? Now, just chewing on that for a moment. Jim touched on this earlier. about Abraham being the once a Gentile and becoming a Jew. How was he saved?
He believed the Lord.
Genesis 15:6. Can you put that up there for me? Now, how did Abraham come about believing the Lord? Did it just slap him upside his head? What happened? What happened? You said it earlier, Jim. God went to Abraham and talked to him, didn't he? God showed up and said, "Hey, Abraham." I mean, in varying different ways. God has said there was angels. Jesus is in a Christophany, we call it, shows up and deals with Abraham. There is some special revelation. I think you used that word earlier, right? Special revelation that happened for Abraham before he came to faith. There was some evangelizing of God himself to Abraham, right? Now, obviously, yeah. Yeah. There's something different here. It met something in their soul. So if you're asking that question, who's evangelizing? Who's evangelizing? Well, right there with Abraham, and to Brenda's point earlier, God did his own evangelizing for Abraham. That makes sense to me, though, because he's starting a whole chosen people. Right? Well, it doesn't stop there. What about Esther? What about Esther? Think about this. Now, Esther is queen of what nation? Persia. Okay, pretty Gentile nation, right? Good heavens, very very difficult place. In the entire book of Esther, there is not a mention of the word God. Okay, but it does talk about the Jews. Look at what Esther 8:17 says. After all of what happened in Esther, and I don't have time to tell you all that, you should know what happened with Esther and Mordecai and all the rest of it. It says, in every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. Is that what I meant to, right? Is that it? Is there more to that, Joe? Yeah, okay. And many people of the nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. I'd never really paid attention to that. And many people of other nationalities became Jews. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Well, whether the point that I'll make in this though, that they became Jews, did that mean that they were saved?
Maybe they feared them because they had somehow seen what God had done for the Jews, and they didn't want God to turn against them.
You could look at it that way. You could look at it either way that you all just said it. Either they were scared because of what the retaliation could have been, and so they said, let me become a part of this. Or it could be that they seen, God's mighty work and what he had done to change the mind of the king through Esther and all that, and they became, it could be. Either way you look at it. Yes. Either way you look at it. Does becoming a Jew mean that you're saved? So we don't know. Even if you say, well, there's no mechanism in the Bible that you had to become Jewish. That a Gentile, these are Gentiles. It says other nationalities, right? So they're Gentiles. I don't believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you had to become Jewish to be saved, even in the Old Testament. Did you? Huh? All right. So I think this is a great verse, and we could debate which side that it's on. But there were people. Now, I will just admit to you, I think this is probably, there were, at least in my view, there were some people that converted to Judaism that did so really, and they probably followed God, and they believed in God, and some of these people from Esther probably were legitimately saved. I believe that there was that the mechanism for salvation at this time could have been that God would have used that some people, that when the Jews were going out talking about their God and people converted to Judaism, that some of them people would have been quote unquote saved. Because they would have then believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They would have done the things like Abraham, right? And they would have put their faith. So that would have been one piece that a person like Esther could have been out there evangelizing for God in a Persian country, and some people were saved because of that. But you did not have to become Jewish to be saved, but there were some people that could have converted to Judaism and then been saved. You get what I'm saying? Okay, one piece that God could have used in sending Jews out there to do that. And I think this is an example of that happening. Think about that even further than Queen Esther. Okay, what about, I put in about Ruth, that some people say Ruth converted, not Ruth, but namely them converted to Judaism. And Ruth 1:16, her words when she looks at Naomi, she says, your God is going to be my God, and your people are going to be my people. From them, whether or not she really converted or not, I don't know, but she was certainly a Gentile. Look at what God did and how He used Daniel. How He used Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They got up into the higher echelons of Nebuchadnezzar's government, didn't they? They certainly, look at what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. We talked about this earlier. In that field with that golden image, out there, there were people that seen how they stood up for God, listening to Nebuchadnezzar at least talk favorably, is all I'm going to give him. He talked favorably to their God because he had just seen a sign. And there were other people that probably came to a saving knowledge of God because of, I know that they did, the jailer or somebody that was there with Daniel and them would have saw how they lived and came to a knowledge of God by their faith. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we just do not see anyone that I'm aware of, and there may be somewhere something that I've missed, but we don't really see that I'm aware of because of this specific named people going, yes, now I'm 100% believe and saved. I mean, there are some instances of that. Sometimes it's out of fear, and there are times that those things happen. We just do not have recorded this massive amount of Gentiles that are just converting. And Esther was a one verse you could look at something happening like that. And there are some other examples. But what I'm saying is that surely, even without a lack of specific biblical examples, surely you understand that God had put Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and them in these places to be able to reach even the Gentile people there, not just to save the remnant, but even to reach the Gentile folks that were there. So you see God evangelizing, right? You see God placing people there. What about, I was going to say Nebuchadnezzar, Nehemiah. Nehemiah becomes the cupbearer to the king. King of what country again? Persia. God reaching out to these Persians, isn't he? All right. He's the cupbearer. How high of a position is that? It may be a short-lived one, but it's a high position. Nehemiah got that position. He was able to go back and help rebuild the wall, right? I mean, and don't you know with of Nehemiah's ministry and his position in that Persian government, then other people were able to come to a knowledge of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joseph. Getting and going through what he went through and we see that whole story and him there with the Egyptian Pharaoh. I mean, look at how God, you say, who was evangelizing? God was evangelizing this thing himself in the same way he's doing today. Now, was he using people like Paul? Who were the Pauls of the day? Maybe Esther, maybe Nehemiah, maybe Daniel, maybe Joseph, All of these people that God had out there, they had probably in their minds a little bit like you see Jonah. They probably didn't know they were doing as much good to the Gentiles, and if they had a thought about it, wouldn't have wanted to, because they had a lot of hatred for these other nations that were out there. But God still was using their witness out there to be able to do things. I mean, Jonah is one of those evangelical times to where God was sending him to these Ninevites to give some rebuke, but Jonah didn't like that. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As far as history, like that short. Yeah. Yeah. 50, 70 years? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Greg, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. I agree. When you look at the who is evangelizing, the whole reason he went to Abraham, the whole reason God raised up the Jews was to be his ambassador to tell everybody about the Messiah, to help usher in. It was an evangelistic method of getting the Jews. Now the Jews decided, we're going to keep this for ourselves. But God's whole intended purpose for doing it the way that he did was to reach the world, right? Was to say, to be the banner for the Messiah. Salvation has never been contingent on works of any kind. It's always been contingent on our faith. Now, when you look at that, though, and the reason I ask you about what faith and how do you get there, one of the things that we can appreciate is that our faith is based on the revelation God had provided at the time. Now, for you and I today, we have the whole picture. So we have to believe the whole picture. Romans 9:10, that you believe that God, has, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in your heart that God was raised from the dead, then you'll be saved. That verse was not applicable to a Gentile in Old Testament times. They didn't know Jesus' name. They didn't have that revelation, but they did have revelation, and I don't mean revelation the book. I mean a revealed truth from God. Okay, so at whatever their context of the revelation that God had given them, they had to respond in faith to the revelation that God had given to them at the time. I can't tell you what that revelation was because I wasn't there. Some of it we don't have writing of. It could have been, as Jim mentioned, I think it definitely was, that there were people. The Bible is God's recorded history of his people. It is not the recorded history of the entirety of the world and every conversation that ever took place. I know for a fact in my own soul, I can't prove it to you from the Bible, that there were people. I've given you some examples from the Bible that should show you that this is probably true, but there were people that we don't even know their names that God was raising up, ministering in these Gentile communities, speaking for him. Okay? that were proclaiming his word in Philistia, in Egypt, to the Amorites, the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and all of those other people that God had raised up these people. We just don't have their names written down. You know God was doing it. You see what he was doing for the Persians and Esther and where he's putting these people. You know God was doing that. And he was raising these people up to have, so that some of them, did it work for the whole nation? No, but just like in the United States right now, there's a ton of us that supposedly believe. It doesn't seem like we're changing the nation, does it? Right? That doesn't mean God's not working in this nation, though. Okay? So, if you look at I've already said that. All right. So, in something that Jessica alluded to earlier in Romans 1:20, this is a very important verse. Paul, again, is writing to the church at Rome. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his divine nature, his eternal power and divine nature has been clearly seen. So hold on a minute. God's invisibleness, right? The fact that he's here, his invisible qualities, his divine nature, he is God, he is divine, he is the Almighty, has been clearly seen. And what has been showing people? How is it being clearly seen? Through what has been made. Being understood from what has been made so that people are without excuse. This verse has been applicable since creation, it says. This is general revelation now. We've talked earlier about special revelation, specific revelation. This is general revelation. Every person in the entire world has been able to look at this rock that we're living on and has been able to say, there's a creator, there's a God, because they see what's happening. And that draws them to a place. It cannot draw you to a saving place, but it will draw you to a place of pondering. Yes, sir. Mm. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So when you look at this, everybody in the world, why does every people group on the planet, every group of people that has ever existed, as far as nations and people groups, not subsets, but the whole, every one of us have always believed in a higher power. Always believed. There's never been born an atheist people group that a whole nation grew up there. Everybody's believed, because they look at it, it's the only thing that makes sense. I see a pew, I figured there was a carpenter to cut down a tree, fashioned some wood, made these pews up. You get it. Now that gets you to a point, and then you start pondering, okay, hold on. Now I see the world's here. Seems like that must be, if there's design, there must be a designer. And you look at a painting, you say, that's a beautiful painting. Man, I want that painting. What's one of the questions you may ask? Who painted it? When did they paint it? How did they have the ability to paint it? You start asking all of these questions. Well, that's what people start doing in their hearts when they had the general revelation. And they start asking in their hearts these questions. Don't you know? Oh, this excites me. Don't you know that God's going to raise up like a Cheryl Strange to put you in the right place to help answer the questions that's in the hearts of those people right there? And you couldn't have orchestrated that because you had no idea what's happening in their heart. But God will use you. He's been doing it the same way since the beginning of time. He was doing it in the Old Testament, and it's the same way he's doing it today. There's no difference. There's no change. He doesn't need a scripted prayer. He doesn't need a mechanism. He doesn't need a church altar. He doesn't need a pastor. He doesn't need a class, a seminary degree, or a church catechism class to be able to get somebody saved. Folks, you don't even have to know the scripture. Oh, that's hard to say that. But if you had to know the scripture, what happens when that 4-year-old boy got mauled by that dog? Did he know the entirety of the Bible? Could he tell me, that little boy, tell me about soteriology? And we believe that he went to heaven. Why? Because he was only able to respond to the revelation he had at the time. Okay? And I don't believe that God ever holds somebody accountable to more than what he has revealed to them. He's going to give you an opportunity to choose or deny. Okay? And nobody dies. So you say to me, well, what happens? The Bible says that we're supposed to go out and evacuate. Yes, we are. That's for us. He chooses to use us as instruments of his will, but we have no power to stop his plan. Every Christian right now can say, I will not go to Iran and minister for him for the Iranian people. You think God won't send send an angel over there to somebody? You think God won't make a rock cry out in Tehran? Even if all the Christians got together and said, no, what we would do was we would miss an opportunity. And that's what happens all the time. That's what's happened across human history. If you do not have a missionary that goes to some village and all of these people have been dying, folks, if there are some people, I meant to say this early on and I forgot, but there are some people that answer this question and they say, well, no, see what happened is all these people died in the Old Testament and they all went to Sheol and they were all kind of sitting there in their place, Abraham's bosom, paradise or whatever. And when Christ just was dead in the tomb and he went down there and he grabbed all them people and he took them to heaven with him. So that's when Abraham and all of them went to heaven, and that's how they got saved after Christ died. I would just submit to you, find out where Jesus emptied a portion of that prior to the rapture. When the rapture occurs, what does it say? The dead in Christ will? Where are they rising from if they already risen there? Okay, that's when the first resurrection of that place goes. And then there's going to be the resurrection of the hell side where the rich man's at, all right, over there. And that's going to happen when they go before their judgment. And that occurs after the 1,000 years, if my timeline is right, Jim. Right? Isn't that judgment? If you go in... That's what I'm saying. Yeah, then the entirety of the Hades gets thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, there's difference. You can look at all of that. I don't think that there's any scripture that I don't believe it, but there are people that do, that believe that's how that happened. Those people all were just kind of sleeping, or they were kind of just dead, or whatever, and then they got the fullness of their salvation. I believe all these people have been basking in the presence of Jesus, like like the beggar Lazarus was doing at Abraham's bosom, okay? And he wasn't in torment. I believe all the people have been in torment that have died. They didn't believe. Now, we're going to be judged later, and that's a different story. But God is not letting people die and go to eternal torment right now. And you have the Catholics that believe in purgatory, so they're there for a little while, and then they get the upgrade later. There's all these things that come. But I want to give to you, we need to stick to the basics when you talk about salvation. In Ephesians 2, verses 8 and 9, it says, for it is by grace that you've been saved through faith. And this not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not by works, that anyone can boast. And I've given to you the 5 solas that Martin Luther and them talked about in this picture. And sola gratia, saved by grace alone. Sola fide, through faith alone. Sola Christus, in Christ alone. Sola scriptura, according to the scripture alone. And sola Deo gloria, for the glory of God alone. So you're saved by grace alone, through faith in Christ alone, according to the scriptures, and by the glory of God alone. Not by a scripted prayer or anything else that has been done. And he has never, ever changed that. So you think about the application of how this is in our world today. Salvation is something that we talk about in church sometimes like we have it all figured out. That we know exactly what a person better do. They better check off these 5 boxes and they are saved. Well, folks, if that would be true, we'd have a lot of people that were born again in the United States if the born again part happened just because you walked up here. A lot of people come up to an altar, they go to an event, and the altars, the people say, oh, this morning the altars were filled. That's not a bad thing. I'd rather the office be filled maybe than not filled. Okay, so that's a good thing. But that doesn't mean that all those people that come down there didn't lie. They didn't just do it for show. How many times somebody, said, hey, I prayed and I really wasn't saved, because basically you lied to God and you told him that you were turning your life over, and you got up and you picked it back up and walked with him. You walked away. Okay? Salvation comes when we surrender our heart and our faith. That's where that belief comes. And it says in Genesis there about Abraham that when Abraham believed, it was credited to him as righteousness. Salvation is so much easier than we sometimes make it sound like in the church, because what we're trying to talk about, it's easy to be saved. It's hard to walk the path of sanctification, because that means you got to not do how your still carnal flesh that you're living in wants you to do. That struggle between that sin. When you're not saved, that's easy. Just to carpe diem, seize the day. No big deal. To get saved, hey, that's easy. Believe, surrender your life. But then you got to live for God. You got to obey his commands. You got to do all of those things. Not to keep being saved necessarily. Because you can not be the best of Christians, but when we go to judgment day, that's what gives us pause. That's why I said it's appointed unto man once to die, then after that the judgment. Because you may be able to make it to heaven, and then you may get to your judgment, and your precious stone pile, when all your life passes before him, you may have a couple of cubic zirconias down there, not even a real diamond. You may walk in the gate, but I don't care about, somebody was saying the other day about Miss Wilma, she wants stars in her crown. Let me just tell you something. I don't care about how many stars I got. I really am not doing anything for God to even get a jewel in my crown. You know what? When I stand before him, I do not want to see disappointment in his eyes. Do you realize when we stand before him, and not those beautiful blue eyes that boy seen in that book, but eyes of blazing fire, and we've got to say, yes, Jesus, I'm sorry. I missed those opportunities. I know that what you're talking about. When he's done, when you still, as we talked about not too long ago, you can still see the scars. That gives me pause. That gives me pause. That's why I try to do right, because I already have done things that are going to pass through there and become their wood, hay, stubble, and ash are going to get burned up. And I can't go back and change that, but you can change every day going forward, okay, to try to do as best we can to not. I don't need nothing more than just him saying, enter in, that good and faithful servant. If he lets me in and I don't have to spend eternity separated from him in eternal punishment, that's enough for me. If I get rewards or blessings or positions or whatever, that would be icing on the cake. I'm not trying to go after that. He's already done enough for us to give him all of that. Just think how awesome it is, though, how much he doesn't need us. I think that's awesome. He doesn't need us. And you know what makes it so wonderful when you look at it? Then you have to say, well, why does he use us? And what a privilege we have that he uses us. But never, ever, ever has he needed us or our plans to make somebody saved. You don't win anybody. He's been winning them since the very beginning. He'll be the one winning them towards the end. We just have the awesome privilege of taking a small part. And then when we do, he gives us some mercy and grace and rewards for being a part of who he is. I'm telling you, there cannot possibly be a better message to this lost and dying world than that. Okay, let's pray. Father God, I praise you and I thank you, Lord, for the reading of your word. And Father, as we answered the question, how were Gentiles saved in the Old Testament? Lord, the answer is they're saved by faith. They're saved as you looked at their heart, God, and you evaluated their heart's condition, and you realized that they responded to what they had been revealed to in their life, Lord, and that you make that determination, Father, and Lord, as long as they have responded to the general revelation, to the special revelation that you've poured out upon them, and that you have sent people into their life, Father, that they are saved. And Lord, that's the same way today. There are people, Lord, in the school systems like we've talked about. There are people in the workplaces. There's people in our neighborhoods, Lord, and they will never breathe their last breath and be able to recite every verse in the Bible and every doctrine and Lord, really be able to regurgitate all the commands, Lord, that we're supposed to be teaching them. But Father, that they'll have a saving knowledge and a saving faith because, Lord, they responded in faith, Lord, and believed in your Son Jesus Christ and what you've done by sending him to the cross to be that substitutionary atoning sacrifice for us, and then as he raised himself from the dead, being, Lord, that Savior for us. Lord, they place their belief and their trust and their life, Lord, into him, then they're saved. And Father, it's up to us to try to help people along that path of sanctification. And Lord, I pray that you will use us, that Father, that we can be those Esthers, those Nehemiahs, all of these different people, Lord, and all those countless people, Lord, that I wish I knew their names. I wish I knew what the types of ministries that were taking place in these Gentile lands, Lord, that we don't have recorded. But Lord, you have us in foreign lands right now. Lord, we're in a foreign land in our own country. Lord, as we are trying to tell people about you, use us, Lord, as instruments of your will to tell people about your Son, Jesus Christ, so that they too may have the saving knowledge that we have today.